Over 7 months since a controlled rail car burn sent toxic chemical plumes into the air in East Palestine, Ohio, chemical testing is showing dangerous levels of toxins still remain throughout the town. According to Newsnation, independent testing expert Scott Smith told Newsnation the total dioxins in a recent soil sample were present at 2.5 parts per billion.
Newsnation reporter Rich McHugh, who has been on the ground reporting in East Palestine, traveled to a Missouri town where a similar disaster occurred 40 years ago, leaving the area a ghost town. Let's take a look.
To put dioxin levels of 2.5 parts per billion in context, we traveled 630 miles away to Times Beach, Missouri.
This is what used to be Times Beach. This is Old Highway 66.
Right here.
This was a liquor store and a tavern.
Marilyn Leisner was the last mayor of Times Beach.
They told us on December 23rd, 1982, that if we were in our homes, to leave, and if we were out, not to come back.
In the 1970s, the roads of Times Beach were sprayed with oil to contain the dust, but they were contaminated by dioxin. 10 years later, the EPA and the CDC found the dioxins in the soil there. Quote, of 255 samples, levels of dioxin in a few yards and in one home show levels greater than 1 part per billion and less than 5 parts per billion. The government permanently relocated every resident, bought all the properties after the CDC advised it was necessary because, quote, the hazard posed by dioxin contamination is a continuing threat to health of citizens in the community.
Newsnation reporter Rich McHugh joins us now to discuss. Rich, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with what are the potential health effects of this level of dioxin, and why haven't these people been evacuated given this comparison that's been made to Times Beach?
It's a good question. I'm not sure we actually know the health effects. We know that dioxins are carcinogens. They're some of the most carcinogenic compounds on the planet. There's many of them, so there's a scale of which ones are more harmful, but they are certainly, there's no safe level. That's what I've been told by experts. There's no safe level of dioxins to have in your home or your soil. The EPA set certain standards. But this town had, when I read that this town was evacuated with this similar range, 1 part per billion to 5 parts per billion. And then when this independent testing came back, showing that this woman, Shelby Walker's soil tested at 2.5 parts per billion, it's all numbers, but when you actually compare those to Times Beach, it's the same. And so to me, it was shocking and to realize that there's this entire town sitting here, East Palestine, Ohio, and they still haven't even tested in these residents' homes or in their property. This is independent testing. The EPA won't test. You know, these people are asking to have their homes and their soil tested, and they will not test.
So it sounds like with the similar amount of dioxins being found in the soil in East Palestine, Ohio, to the Missouri town you visited, there might be a similar scenario necessary in the future where East Palestine is evacuated or the people are forced to relocate. Did any of the Missouri residents explain what that process was like?
Well, it's very interesting. I don't want to be alarmist and say this is definitely the same scenario. I'm saying it's a possible scenario, and I think that's what everybody would also say. The Times Beach residents, you know, it's hard to find people who are still alive. The woman I spoke with, Marilyn Leisner, she was the last mayor. She said most of her family came down with illnesses. Many have since gone. The reporters that even covered it are now since deceased. And so there is definitely a comparison. She herself said, look, this is if this is happening in East Palestine, these residents should be evacuated. And that's what she's been watching this from Times Beach, Missouri, and just ultimately concerned about it.
It's very disturbing. It sounds like a similar health outcomes potentially to the first responders on 9/11. Rich, where is the government response here? Why is the EPA not going out and testing? Where is Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg? I mean, it seems like everyone has just forgotten about East Palestine.
That's exactly right. And so here's where it currently stands. Recently, in July, Governor Mike DeWine of Ohio declared the area a disaster. It was right up into a deadline, and he finally said, okay, this is a disaster area. So then it heads to President Biden's desk. That's where it currently stands. If President Biden were to sign an emergency declaration, that would bring in federal support, FEMA. But that hasn't happened yet, and that's what the residents of East Palestine are begging for, literally begging for. They're saying, look, right now you have a town that is under the control of the villain here, which is Norfolk Southern, the train operator. And that shouldn't be. We shouldn't have to go to Norfolk Southern for help. We should be able to go to FEMA. We should be able to have our homes tested. Right now, the EPA will not test their homes because they're saying we've tested in 147 locations for dioxins around East Palestine, and those readings tell us they're fine. The townspeople are saying, look, they don't want to find this because once they find it, it's a massive problem that they're not going to be able to contain. And so you have this stalemate, and that's why they're begging for federal help, and they really, truly need it.
Did the mayor describe any sort of lawsuits or financial compensation for the residents who were not only forced to leave, maybe financial compensation for property or assets, or just the distress and cost of having to relocate, or further down the line, health costs?
Absolutely. She said that there were lawsuits, many lawsuits, which is starting to happen with Ohio and Pennsylvania. Keep in mind, Pennsylvania, this is right on the border of Pennsylvania. The mayor of Times Beach said, look, the government ultimately came in and bought out these homes. The president at the time was Ronald Reagan, and he formed a task force with the EPA and the CDC, and they came in and then just made it happen. That hasn't happened in East Palestine, but if that were to happen, there's a lot more homes in East Palestine and the area that would have to be bought out. And so that is probably a concern that they're weighing. Right now, Norfolk Southern is allegedly on the hook for this whole thing because it was their fault. But the residents here are saying, look, we can't wait till this resolves itself in court and in lawsuits. We need help now, and we need FEMA to come in and help us. We need these people, you know, they're in their homes and they don't know if their homes are safe. They're being forced to go back in their homes after living for 6 months in hotels, and now they're coming back and they're saying, look, my house smells. We have air monitors that say the readings are off the charts. They said the air quality is poor. We want our homes tested. Why can't we have our homes tested? Why can't we have our soil tested? This is basic, common sense way forward.
Definitely. And I think it's important to remind viewers, too, that a lot of these people are working class. They can't afford to just relocate themselves for some indefinite period of time while they wait this out. Is there a potential cleanup process that could take place here? Or is this the kind of situation where you kind of just have to wait for the environment to heal itself?
When you're dealing with dioxins, I don't think they heal themselves. I think they actually compound and grow because from what I've learned, I'm no scientist, but they commingle and they create new compounds. So the decision that was made in Times Beach was that these dioxins are here. We can't solve this, and so we're closing up shop. Everybody has to get out, and it's a veritable ghost town. The roads are gone. The forest, it's like a giant forest. You see where the roads once were, and they're crowded over by forest. And, you know, Marilyn, the mayor there, we were walking along what was once these roads saying, look, you can still see some of the flowers here. They were planted on people's homes. And when everybody left, like, the flowers survived, but everything else was bulldozed. So I don't think I think what needs to happen here, if I'm understanding the experts and I'm understanding the desires of the residents, more testing needs to be done. More transparency needs to happen here. Like, just for everybody to say, here's the testing. We've tested the 400 homes right next to the train derailment and beyond. Here are the results. Show everybody the results, and be transparent about it. And everybody says that's not happening, and from what I can tell, that's not happening.
This is such an important story, not just for the country, but for folks in East Palestine, Ohio, as well. Thank you so much for reporting on it, Rick McHugh with Newsnation.
Thank you for having me.